The room is really, really packed.
Yeah.
So everyone decide if you want to wear your mask or not.
I'm not.
Oh, taxi's pulling up.
So everyone decide if you want to wear your mask or not.
I'm not.
Oh, that's delayed.
Oh, that's a long delay.
That's
It was the live stream.
that's gonna be annoying.
Thanks.
No, I muted it. I apologize. I didn't mean for that to run. Just a second here, guys. I gotta push a button and we'll go.
No, don't do it yet.
That's our cue. Oh,
I have the recorder started, Brandon.
you're started, Janelle? Okay. And we are live, it looks like. So we'll go ahead and get started. We'll call to order the Stevensville Town Council meeting. Today is Thursday, May 27th, 2021. Ms. Bertha, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Devlin. Here. Councilmember Ludington.
Here.
Councilmember Shurd.
Here.
And Councilmember Vic.
Here.
Mayor Dewey.
Here, thank you for your indulgence as we attempt this virtual blend of a meeting this evening. Family obligations required me to travel out of town, and so I'm pleased to participate this way. Hopefully all runs smoothly. With that, if you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America.
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we've reached public comment. Is there any public comment from the audience on items not listed on tonight's agenda? Janelle, you'll have to cue me if there's no one in the room.
There is no one here tonight, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
We'll move on then to the approval of minutes. We have April 8th, 2021's meeting minutes before you for approval tonight.
I'll make a motion to approve April 8th.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Devlin, seconded by Mr. Shurd to approve April 8th's meeting minutes. Is there any council discussion?
Yeah, I did notice that on page 12 of the packet, there's an incorrect word used that I said. I didn't say rescind, but I'll go back and listen. I know I didn't say rescind, but I will go back and listen to see exactly what it was that I had said. I can't remember the exact word at this moment.
Okay.
And I'll just email you, Janelle, and CC you, Mayor, to let you guys know what the correct term is.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion from council? All right, assuming there's no public comment, we'll go ahead and call for the vote. Ms. Berthoud?
Councilmember Devlin.
Aye.
Councilmember Ludington.
Aye.
Councilmember Shurd.
Aye.
And Councilmember Vic.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Next, you have claims 16763 through 16782.
I'll make a motion to approve claims as presented.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Vic, seconded by Mr. Shurd to approve claims as presented this evening. Discussion from council.
Yeah, I've got one that says streets SCL exams.
Can you refer to a claim number for us, Paul?
16763. It was a visa.
I think it's a CDL.
Is it CDL?
Should be CDL.
For the streets department. Yeah. Okay. CDL. Okay.
And I do have a question too, and that is on claim 16781, and that's for the taser thing. Obviously, I wasn't, or I mean, I don't know. Is that, Are we paying yearly on those tasers? Or
Correct.
how's that working?
We pay it annual lease for those tasers.
Okay, so I'm guessing if we don't pay it, then the tasers stops functioning.
Correct, they repossess them.
Oh, okay. All right, thanks.
You're welcome. Any other questions from council on the claims? All right, no public comment, correct, Janelle?
Correct.
All right, we'll move forward with calling for the vote. Go ahead, Ms. Berthoud.
Councilmember Devlin,
Aye.
Councilmember Ludington,
Aye.
Councilmember Bashard,
Aye.
and Councilmember Vic.
Aye.
All right, in rapid fire, you have no administrative reports, guests, correspondence, or public hearings before you this evening. We'll get into unfinished business. You have discussion decision on the second reading of ordinance 167, rezoning certain parcels from R1 to R2 residential. This is the parcel between Pine Street and North Avenue on the north side of the town.
I'll make a motion to approve the second reading.
Is there a second? Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Vick, seconded by Mr. Ludington to approve second reading of ordinance 167. Council discussion.
Yeah, real quick question, Mayor. On the certificate of survey, we're pretty much right under the letter A where those lots are at. Or is there currently residences on those lots? I can't rightfully remember at this moment.
Let me
Buildings or anything.
pull that up real quick, Dempsey, and look at it.
I don't think,
I don't think there's anything there, but I couldn't remember if there was or not at the moment.
So are you talking about lots 16, 15?
No. The area that's within the perimeter.
Oh, no, there's nothing built on inside the perimeter at all.
yeah, inside that purple line, there's nothing.
Okay.
Those are legally created lots.
Okay.
Any other questions or comment from the council on 167, second reading? And public comment, Janelle?
There is none.
Okay, we'll go ahead and call for the vote.
Councilmember Devlin,
Aye.
Councilmember Ludington,
Aye.
Councilmember Bashard,
Aye.
and Councilmember Vic.
Aye.
All right, the motion passes unanimously. That ordinance will take effect 30 days from Monday, June 7th, because that'll be the soonest I'm back to sign it. So just be notice of that. That zoning change will take effect in 30 days. The next item of business you have is the second reading of ordinance 169, amending the building and technical codes for the town of Stevensville's ordinances.
I'll make a motion to approve second reading of ordinance 169. Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Vick, second by Mr. Ludington to approve second reading of ordinance 169.
Sure.
Correction, Shurd was your second.
Oh, sorry, I can't see your lips move, so. Okay, corrected, let's correct the record that Mr. Shurd seconded the motion to approve ordinance 169. Is there any council discussion? All right, barring any public comment, Ms. Berthoud, you can go ahead and call for the vote.
There is no public comment. Councilmember Devlin,
Aye.
Councilmember Ludington,
Aye.
Councilmember Bashard,
Aye.
and Councilmember Vic.
Aye.
All right, that too will take effect in 30 days from my signature. We'll move into new business then. We have discussion decision on the special event and alcohol use permit for a Lutzenheiser fundraiser, care of the Stevensville Civic Club. Janelle, you're probably more or less well-versed in this permit because of your contact with the applicant. Do you want to brief the council?
Sure.
Thank you.
Special event permit for Lutzenheiser's fundraiser. Stevensville Civic Club is helping with that, so it's their, as you'll see in the packet, their alcohol special permit is being used through them, along with liability insurance is through the Civic Club as well. It came to us a little bit late. I know it's coming up next Friday, but due to some paperwork and moving things around, it's coming up just at this meeting. But if you have any questions, I can answer most of them.
Are there any questions from council on the event permit?
I'll make a motion to approve the special event and alcohol use permit.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Sherd, seconded by Mr. Vick to approve the special event alcohol use permit for the Letzenheiser fundraiser. For the council discussion. All right, hearing no public comment, then we'll go ahead and call for the vote. Ms. Berthoud?
No public comment. Councilmember Devlin,
Aye.
Councilmember Ludington,
Aye.
Councilmember Sherd,
Aye.
and Councilmember Vick.
Aye.
Okay,
Thank you, guys.
that motion passes. We have then discussion decision on a contract with Newfields Companies LLC for water rights hydrology. You'll recall, as a process we've for a long time now undertaken, we're working through water rights. There was kind of a three-prong approach to resolving the water rights with our engineering firm, our legal counsel for water rights, Ross Miller, and then we needed a hydrologist or hydrology firm involved to help with that project as well. So this is that third piece that we need for the project, so it can finally come together in terms of pulling a permit together with the DNRC. This contract was advertised through an RFQ process. Newfields was the only firm to submit for the RFQ. Coincidentally, they're working with HDR, our engineers, on other water rights work in other communities. And so they already have a relationship established, which is advantageous for our organization. So with that, we've brought the contract forward for signature, approval from the council. From there, we'll put together the scope of services and nail down exact dollar amounts that will be incorporated into your fiscal year 22 budget.
Before we go into a motion, Mayor, I do have a couple of questions for you. One, what is the cost on this contract? I'm not able to find it in the.
Sure, as stated. So
Okay, there wasn't one.
So as I stated, the scope of work will determine the costs. Under the contract. We need to contract with the firm so that we can put a scope of work into place, given the level that this project involves. And then that scope of work will help us determine, if we get that scope of work back, which we would give input into that scope of work and drive that, and the costs don't look as they probably should for us, whatever that looks like, then we're going to negotiate that scope of work and determine that. Similar to a task order.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I guess the second question that I really have is, this looks just like a general contract that they sent, like it doesn't have an effective date or it doesn't have us listed as a client on there. Is that normal practice for this organization or for that organization?
So upon your approval, we'll fill in the effective date because that effective date will be on signature, and then we'll edit in our name into that document.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the contract.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Vick and second by Mr. Ludington to approve the contract with Newfields for water rights hydrology. Any further council discussion?
Yeah, I noticed in this that the effective date is, and it continues for 365 days, and I'm hoping that we'll have some sort of conclusion and report from this group before that year expires.
Yes, that's our hope as well. I think once this piece gets plugged into the project, we're going to see some pretty rapid movement in terms of the water rights, as mind you, as quickly as water rights can move. That's all relative because water rights do not move fast. but I think we're going to see some significant progress on that project. Okay, is there anything further from the council? All right, assuming there's no public comment, Ms. Berthoud, you can go ahead and call for the vote, please.
No public comment. Councilmember Devlin,
Aye.
Councilmember Ludington,
Aye.
Councilmember Schurd,
Aye.
and Councilmember Vic.
Aye.
Okay, the next item of consideration for the council is discussion decision on the appointment of a council member to serve on the airport board. At the last town council meeting, Councilmember Vic expressed that he was having scheduling conflicts with the airport board meetings, and requested that the council consider a reappointment to the airport board for someone who can fulfill those duties.
Yeah, and I'll continue off of that too. I am willing to swap with somebody as well if there is a board that someone would like to exchange with. I mean,
Don't everybody jump up at once.
I know.
I kind of instigated that with an email to you saying that I would switch boards. Since this was brought up at our last meeting, I have gone through and looked at my schedule, and I do not like to say no, and I tend to take on more with our community than I probably should. I'm not in a position where I can take something else on at this time. I was hoping that I would. I've had a couple other things fall into my lap, and if I take on something else, something's gonna get dropped.
Right.
So I can't make that commitment right now.
Okay. Is anybody else interested? If not, then I will make it work. So I will find a way to make it work.
That sounds good.
So, all right. Then I guess we can just move on to the next item.
Given that that's satisfactorily addressed, we'll move into discussion decision installation of a dead end sign on Central Avenue. Mr. Schurd, I'll let you take this one.
Several of the individuals that live on Central are concerned that because it's at the end of the cul-de-sac and it's more of a straight shot and quite a few children playing on the street, that they would like to see a dead end sign installed on the corner of Central and Charlos. I guess it would be facing east as you're entering the last section of Central Avenue where there's not any outlets.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Devlin, seconded by Mr. Vic to approve the installation of a dead end sign on Central Avenue from Charlotte Street. Further council discussion.
I'm assuming that you're talking northwest corner of that intersection.
Yes, that's where the.
Correct.
A boulevard there. No
Yeah.
sidewalk. No sidewalk there.
No.
Anything further from council?
I guess the only question I really got is, we're gonna add this to the list of other signs that still have yet to be put up that we approved.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. All right, if there's no further comment from council and no public comment, we'll go ahead and call for the vote. Ms. Berthoud?
There's no public comment. Councilmember Devlin,
Aye.
Councilmember Ludington,
Aye.
Councilmember Schurd,
Aye.
and Councilmember Vic.
Aye.
Okay, the next item of business is discussion decision on street name request for Cowhide Lane. Cowhide Lane currently has, it's located in the Twin Creeks subdivision, for those of you who aren't familiar with where it's located, and there's really only two buildings on that roadway or that street. One is our well house, and the other is the residence of Mr. Reeves, who is the petitioner to change the name of the street. The primary reason, other than it being a city street, the primary reason this came to our attention was because we're the only other property owner on that street. And as such, we have to agree whether or not we want the street name changed. Secondary to that, then, of course, you have jurisdiction of the streets in Stevensville, and so then you get to approve whether they're named one way or another. So with that, Mr. Reeves has petitioned that the Cowhide Lane be renamed. I need to pull up the packet here. His first proposed road name is Silverstone Lane. If you look in the packet, there are 3 alternatives to his proposed road name. So if council's inclined to rename Cowhide Lane, then I'd seek a motion from you stating that you approve the name change request from Cowhide Lane to the name that you prefer.
I'll make a motion to change the street name from Cowhide Lane to Silverstone Lane.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Sherd, second by Mr. Luddington to approve the name change request for Cowhide Lane to Silverstone Lane. Further council discussion?
Yeah, also a dead end, correct?
It is a dead end, and I don't think there are any plans at this time to continue it. So that would be solely up to Mr. Reeves. He owns the property at the end of it. All right.
I kind of like Silver Lining Lane.
Ooh, we're at deadlock.
Well, it's better than pumping station lane.
The funny thing is the address of the well field doesn't even come off of that road. It's off of, the address is off Middle Burnt Fork. The access is off the street. So we won't see an address change, but we own property adjacent, so we had to consent.
And there's no other lots off of that?
No, there's not.
Okay.
Just the 2 property owners.
And Mr. Reeves is paying the processing fee. Or are we splitting
To
it?
the county, yes. So the county requires a processing fee so that they can change the name in their GIS system so that 911 records and all of those other things are updated. We don't have a processing fee for it.
And the applicant pays that, correct?
Correct. Yes, we do not.
And I know this is not something that, you know, Janelle or any of the folks in the office typically see on a daily or even decadely instance, but do we not have our own type of application for this?
No, we don't.
Okay.
This is the first street name change that I've seen in 5 to 8 years. The only other time the council changed street names was when the credit union took over the subdivision in the first place. They changed all the street names from the previous subdivider. But that was the only time I remember significant street name changes in the town.
Pretty sure there's probably an Audrey Emo story to go along with why street names have never been changed.
Well, we know how change goes. So with that, if there's no public comment or nothing further from the council, Ms. Bertha, I'll defer to you to call for the vote, roll call vote.
No public comment. Councilmember Devlin,
Aye.
Councilmember Luddington,
Aye.
Councilmember Sherd,
Aye.
and Councilmember Vic.
Aye.
Okay. We'll move on then to discussion decision on a recreation program facilitator job description and wage. A job description is included in your packet. Mr. Sunstang is in attendance at tonight's meeting to discuss the purpose of the position and the direction of the parks programming as it would be impacted by implementing this. So Mr. Sunstang, I'll defer to you.
So yeah, this position would be kind of the site facilitator, the coach, youth programming, seasonal programming, senior citizen programming. Currently with our parks program, I'm stretched a little thin, so to give up, up to 25, 30 hours a week is tough. So we're looking to hire a full-time seasonal person for this summer for summer programming with a wage between $13.50 to $15 an hour. And then there is hopes of after-school programming for this community since we have little to none for our kids in the youth in this community. So this is something that we'd like to get going now, get it going for the summer. After the year of COVID, we all know how much kids need to get out and socialize and get back together. So yeah, this is a position that I would help make curriculums for these camps and events, and then this person would be responsible for facilitating those and kind of being the on-site coordinator. When they aren't doing programming, if there's an off week or it doesn't take up their full week, they can assist with park maintenance, park projects, and special event type stuff.
How many hours a week are we looking at for them?
Full-time. So I mean, based off of After School Alliance, which is a program that I've done a lot of research through, they have a bunch of curriculums already made for summer programming and after school programming. For a summer program, they recommend at least 5 hours a day for 5 days a week, so 25 hours of actual programming. Then you have to add in the site setup, site takedown, cleanup, and things of that nature. So I'm thinking at least 25 hours of programming time spent during the week of the summers, and then it will be a full-time position with forming the curriculums, getting supplies, setting up, taking down, and things of that nature.
It's the administration's intent that this position or positions, if more than one is required, depending on the level of programming that the Parks Department can offer, that the wages would be covered by fees charged for the programming. That's somewhat unclear still because we're not doing that yet. So we really don't know what actual revenue looks like. We really don't know. We can make projections, but that's all they are. So given that this is a unique circumstance in that we're trying to set programming up and offer services to the community at the tail end, or perhaps just right in a pandemic, our backup plan is to use the American Rescue Plan funding that the town will receive to offset any costs that are not covered by fees. That's a covered use of that funding, and ties in exactly with what Treasury guidance wants us to do with programming, especially childcare programming. We're not getting into the childcare business necessarily with these positions and with this programming, but we are trying to facilitate, an educational need in the community over the summer, especially with social aspects of youth being engaged. So that is kind of the financial outlay. Basically, if a program isn't being offered, then the position won't work. If there are programs being offered, then the positions are necessary in order to facilitate those positions, because Mr. Sunstang, in the midst of everything else he does for the Parks Department and making sure the aquatics program runs sufficiently, making sure maintenance is taken care of, and overseeing his own budget, he does not have the time to facilitate 3 age groups of camps 5 days a week. That's just not feasible for his position alone. So he needs some help. And that's why you generally charge tuition of some kind. Even if it's just a day camp, you usually charge a registration for those folks to offset the costs involved with doing those camps.
Okay, final question on this. Are we looking at this being a seasonal position, or is it gonna go throughout the entire year?
We're looking to hire a seasonal full-time position right now with hopes that programming does well, and then potentially roll this into a full-time year-round position that runs after school programming all through the year, as well as summer programming. But initially, we're looking to get the program off the ground with a seasonal position this summer.
Okay.
I guess my concern is this is a full-time position with benefits.
If they're seasonal, no.
No benefits, but
Yeah, no benefits.
those are seasonal for now.
I guess my concern is taking on a new position right before we go into our budget. And it would be my preference that we table this discussion until after our budget is finalized.
Have you looked into the ability to do an internship program? Maybe like a college student that needs, they're required to do so many, depending upon what, my brain's not working quite right today.
Depending on their degree path or
Yes, their
what
degree,
program
thank
they're
you.
in.
You might be able to put that together with partnering with Bitter College or University of Montana and get somebody for free, if not very, very low cost.
That's something that I haven't necessarily fully explored. I do have some decent connections with kind of outreach type stuff at the university, but that's not something that I've looked in detail yet.
And am I working? No. All right, so, and the only other thing too that I have to say about that, I do like the idea of an internship, but either way, we'd still have to have a position. For that person, like, we'd still have to approve the position.
This doesn't have a financial aspect to it yet. We just have a job description.
Right.
And
So-
I guess I think that's what I'm looking at this point, is this is just a job description for something that we might be looking at doing. Are you looking at primarily doing it at Lewis and Clark Park this year?
The initial thought, I have lots of different ideas for programming options. Some are at Lewis and Clark Park, but like last year I did nature walks and stuff out at the Refuge River Park. Maybe an outdoor adventure day where you go do St. Mary's. Lots of different options. The basis would be at Lewis and Clark Park for kind of like sporting type camps and things of that nature. But I think it has the ability to be elsewhere.
So let me just clarify a few points. Mr. Sunstang's current budget can handle a position, at least one position, through the rest of this fiscal year until a new budget is adopted. Part of the reason we're bringing this now rather than into the new budget is because I don't anticipate you adopting a budget on or before July 1st. And I see that you will probably adopt a budget closer to August 1st. When you do that, we kind of get into a stall on July 1st where we don't really make a lot of movement on anything until the budget's adopted, which means that we would lose the summer of programming if we don't go ahead and move forward now. So our intent this evening by bringing this position, the job description and wage, was to say we have the spending authority in the budget to hire the position, but the position's job description and salary doesn't exist in our policy yet. And we need you to establish that in order to utilize the funding that already exists in Mr. Sunstang's budget to implement the programming. So we put the money in place last year, anticipating that we would offer some programming this summer. But what we didn't do was put the position before you with a job description and an actual wage. So that's what's brought us to this crossroads outside of the regular budget discussion. That's what's brought us here today. And the hope that we could maybe get some sort of preliminary programming underway sooner rather than later to at least start offering some programming, into late June, July, and August, rather than just, trying to shove it all at the end of the summer. So, but as I said before, it is funding dependent. So, we get to the end of the summer, if curriculums and camps and programming aren't satisfactorily sustaining the positions and the program to the council's needs and what you expect of it, then the positions, it's a reduction in force. And our intent is to hire it as such. So enfold it just like we do with our lifeguards. When the pool season ends, they know they're out of a job. We would have the same discussion with the person in this position, that when programming slows down and we don't have a sufficient list of folks that are participating, well, then we move on. I like the idea of utilizing internships in the Parks Department specifically. I think that could be very advantageous for Mr. Sunstang's programs. However, I do think that he needs somebody consistent throughout at least the season. Hopefully that person would be willing to come on every season if it doesn't turn into a full-time position year round. But some consistency that Bobby can rely on and maintain a rapport with, to kind of just limit the turnover and the onboarding that he might have to experience every time, you know, we had a new internship come through. That's not to say that internships shouldn't be available to help us actually facilitate hands-on programming when the day comes to, you know, put boots on the ground. Those are my thoughts.
I'll make a motion to approve the job
Good.
description.
Can I?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
I'm feeling like either right before our budget last year or during our budget meetings, we already had discussed all of this. You had brought forth a lot of ideas that you were gonna springboard throughout the summer pandemic, and some winter activities. And I thought that we had already, I know that we did fund this position, but I thought we had already approved this.
We approved the funding of it, but we didn't approve the actual position itself.
There was a position, yeah, there was a position you did approve, Miss Devlin, and that was the sanitization position. And when we went through it was park attendant. And in fact, there's a typographical error at the bottom of this position description that says park attendant job description. And we wanted to be more focused on youth programming in the position description. The park attendant position description does cover some programming facilitation, but it's not at the level we wanted it for youth programming. Our park attendants didn't specifically require a background check, which is something we would want from somebody who's supervising children. And so that's why we're bringing this back to you folks, is because the park attendant description didn't really meet the needs of the program.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I just remember having this conversation.
Yes.
There's a motion on the floor and I'll second it.
Okay, Mr. Vick has moved to approve the recreation program facilitator job description and wage, and it's been seconded by Mr. Luddington. Further discussion from council?
I guess my concern is we're moving into a budget process and creating a position where we're going to be allocating money to the park fund to fund this position, but we have yet to figure out a solution to funding our police department to where we said we would put them, which was at 6 officers. I mean, maybe I need a little education in the budget process, but we have yet to fulfill that obligation. And that's my concern. And that's why I would like to wait till after the budget process is through to fulfill the obligations we've already guaranteed to the police department prior to this. That's just my opinion.
Sure.
That's what I'm trying to get clarification on, because I feel like we already approved this funding. So it's
Yeah.
already in the budget for this
So
year.
if you were to take the funding in fiscal year 21's budget and the bottom line of what you have for spending authority and transfer that into fiscal year 22, which is the budget you're going to start working on, then nothing would change and the position would still remain. It would not, that bottom line budget for the general fund would obviously not include a 5th FTE for the police department. And that position, whether that 5th FTE is incorporated into the next budget, that will be part of the budget conversation. But I mean, this funding is established. I guess if the council's inclination was to say, we're not going to fund this position tonight, and instead we're going to remove whatever, we're going to reallocate whatever funding was available for that and move it over to the police department. Okay, I mean, that's your prerogative. I'll just caution you that the funding we did set in Mr. Sunstang's budget for this position was based on revenue for programs. So Mr. Sunstang has a revenue line in his budget that he's expected to meet in order to fund this position. So it is tied to a revenue source. So to say, well, we're going to cut a parks position, but add a police position, it isn't that easy because we're not charging people for police services, but we are charging for park services. Does that help clarify that a little bit for you?
It does.
Okay. And I don't expect, I'll tell you, we were very ambitious when we put together the fiscal year 21 budget, where I think Mr. Sunstein has a very high wages appropriation in his parks budget, and he has a very high revenue line in his budget. And we know we're not going to meet that revenue. And so we're very cautious when we utilize those wages. And we're making sure that those two pieces are relative at all times. So, and as I stated earlier, our fallback, we're hoping it's not the case, although that is the intent of the funding. Our fallback is to say that the American Rescue Plan funding would backfill those positions if need be, because that was their intended purpose, was one, to provide this type of programming to the community, but two, to offset any loss of revenue you had. So if the council decided we're not, or maybe we're going to provide scholarships or something like that, that would be another opportunity for that funding. And you're going to get into conversations about American Rescue Plan funding very soon, because it's the check is coming next month. And I'll address that in my executive report specifically.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there any further discussion from council?
Yeah, so the American Rescue Plan, that fund, and I guess I don't want to talk down about the program, but my expectation and what I see in regards to participation is we're not going to generate the revenue to cover the position. And so we're going to use that fallback to cover that, the difference. When that money could be used in other places.
Well, it depends on what other places you have in mind.
And I think that's why I'm wanting to wait until after we go through the budget process to hear what department heads need.
Sure. And that's, I mean, I guess if that's council's direction, then understand that the programming won't happen. I mean, we could investigate after school programming if that's a direction we want to move into, but summer programming will likely not happen this year just because of the gap in the budget process. It's, if we don't get a budget adopted July 1st and it's August 1st, Mr. Sunstein can't get a person hired and implemented and get programming scheduled for 1 month of programming. We'll just push it off to fiscal year 22, which, if that's your direction to do, we'll implement that.
I guess, Bobby, you and me, we discussed during the park board meetings that you already have activities planned throughout the summer. Do you feel that you are not going to be able to facilitate the current ones that we have planned? I mean, I look at it like this summer with it getting off the ground, we'll have a good understanding of how much revenue and how much participation you're gonna have.
Yeah, kind of my thought is if it's on my shoulders and maybe I can't get a park attendant that's already approved position. Me personally, I could facilitate 1 a week at most, with everything else going on. So I mean, if that's what council wants to do and go that way and kind of do that as our assessment of what kind of participation we get, that would be like the maximum availability that I have, is maybe 1 day camp a week at most. But yeah, if it's me and a park attendant, I'm just stretched really thin. The pool's getting ready to go and maintenance of parks is ramping up. And with all that, I will be stretched very thin to implement a bunch of programming. I think it's possible to do a few day camps here or there, but it won't be anywhere near the magnitude that this position is talking about.
Sure, that makes sense. What was your participation last year? Well, that was a kind of COVID summer.
It was COVID and, kids had to wear masks. So a lot of people we didn't get because of that. I did have one nature walk with 12 participants. I had another with only 3. It was pretty crummy weather. that had something to do with it. I had 7 signed up, only 3 showed. But yeah, on those, maybe the average was about 10 with those ones that we ran last year for that. And so that's kind of the gauge I have to go off for the few I've done.
Anything further?
Oh, point of clarification, Mr. Vick, is you made a motion to approve the job description. I just want to make sure that you're also talking about hiring somebody to fill that position, or are we just talking about approving a job description?
We're just talking about approving the job description
Yeah.
right now. We can get to hiring when someone applies and we get to it.
Well, to be clear, you're approving a job description and we're hoping you'll set a wage for that job description. Once the spending authority is set in your budget and once the job description exists, the hire doesn't come back to the town council. That the executive branch just takes, we say, okay, we have the money, we have the policy, we blend them together and we move on and we implement the program.
Okay.
So if you're expecting that a candidate would come back or you know, some sort of a hiring process would come back before council, that wasn't our intent.
And we already approved the funding.
Because the funding is already approved through the end of this fiscal year. You're going to address July 1 forward, but knowing that the position is established helps us move into that budgeting process. And I mean, candidly, when you get into some budget talks, if Mr. Sunsing has the opportunity to get some programming underway, by the time you're at a point of finalizing your budget, you should have some idea of how programming is being utilized or not utilized. I think that there's an advantage now in doing it and going forward with the risk that the position may not be covered by fees, because you have the fallback of the American Rescue Plan and you're not counting on reserves to do that. And the more guidance that comes out on the American Rescue Plan, as it is geared towards you know, these childcare programs and a number of other things in response to the pandemic, that the scope isn't as broad as I think we were initially led to believe of that funding when it comes in. You know, we're not going down the road of beautification projects and that sort of thing, and a lot of other areas where some of that funding could go. Now, there's some functional areas that funding could go, but there's a lot of it to go around in our organization. I think you have a good stopgap now in place to say, okay, if this programming doesn't come through and this is a flop and we don't see the attendance and the programming funds that we thought we would see, then you have something to subsidize that versus, you know, pulling it straight out of reserves and calling it a loss.
We're looking at 12 weeks of summer, probably total expense of less than $10,000.
I just run the numbers, it's probably right after.
Yeah.
I don't see you being able to create that kind of revenue in that time period. That's quite a bit of money for 12 weeks. And that's starting June 1, ending August 30. That's 12 weeks. So, you know, we're going to be using some designated funds to get started with. I think that it's worth exploring if this is something that we want to try to present to the community. I think there's, yeah, like Bobby said, there's nothing out there now. And if you talk to groups of people, that's one of the things that always comes up.
There's definitely a demand for it. We just don't have the supply.
And I understand what Patrick is saying, that you know, we're trying to figure out what we're going to do for our budget and what kind of demands we have there. I would like to see you be able to get started, but I also would like to see you being able to raise 75 or 80% of the cost in fees. So that's going to be a tough road to hoe.
We're looking at having to make about almost $21 an hour.
How much did you say, Jamie?
About $21 an hour
Based on,
Cover your
3 months.
expenses.
For
12
full
months.
expenses.
but based on what wage?
15.
Okay.
At full time.
At full time. Yep, to cover your 3 months. That just, sorry, I'm over here doing math, but that's,
It is what you do.
yeah, it's what I do. So that's, just to give you an idea, you know, that's, it actually comes out to 20.83333, so $21 an hour. That's what you have to make.
So if if Mr. Sunstang held programming just to cover that cost, and he did, well, let's hang on.
We're all gonna write numbers.
No.
I mean, I guess the bottom line of this, you guys, is that even if the revenue is not there, which we hope it would be, I think, you know, I just ran preliminary numbers based off of $14 an hour. And I'm watching what Mr. Sunstang's trying to do with just swim lesson signups. You know, I don't know how realistic it is that he gets 200 campers over a 12-week period. That's what he needs. He needs 200 kids to sign up for a $35 registration fee over the next 12 weeks, just to cover the wages. So if council wants to continue this and you want us to bring forward some more concrete strategy to address the need in our community, I think, you know, we're willing to do that. You know, I think what we'll probably pivot to is bagging programming this summer for Parks and Recreation, and more or less spending the summer trying to strategize how we implement programming in 22.
Now I'm gonna call for the question.
Alrighty, with that,
Instead of, I know you're calling for the question, but instead of just going ahead and turning this down, I was gonna rescind my motion.
why don't we just vote on it, you guys? And 'cause
right.
when we do stuff like that, it makes the minutes really complicated for Janelle.
It's very
So it's
messed
just
up right now.
let it just go vote. So with that, the question's been called. We'll proceed to a vote. Assuming there's no public comment, Ms. Berthoud, go ahead.
No public comment. Councilmember Devlin.
I don't even know what we're voting on after all that. Are we
We're
voting to approve?
voting to approve.
No.
Councilmember Ludington.
No,
Councilmember Sherrod
No,
and Councilmember Vic.
No.
All right, the motion fails. All right, we'll move into the executive report, which ties into a little bit of our previous conversation. And that is, firstly, before we get into the ARPA funding stuff, if you haven't already noticed, Fifth Street project is underway up at Fifth and Park Avenue. And I think, I can't tell you because I wasn't there today, but it sounded like they were going to start ripping out some dirt and getting things ready for new concrete and putting in asphalt. So if you have a minute to swing by that project and check things out, I encourage you to do so. Shifting then into the American Rescue Plan, a lot of information regarding American Rescue Plan has been coming down the pipe in regard to the funding that's available to cities and towns, and Stevensville specifically. I think over the last couple of weeks, I've probably spent upwards of 15 or 20 hours on Zoom calls and research and just figuring these things out and the intricacies of this funding. So a lot of it's good news, though. The town will receive just a little over $501,000 in direct assistance. That's what I would probably call flexible money. That's the funding that comes straight to us. It goes through the state's bank account, but they're not allowed to restrict it. It's allocated based on our population. So we have 501,000 coming our way in that regard. And the scope of that funding is really to respond, to catalyze response and recovery efforts from the pandemic. You can use it for some infrastructure purposes, public safety purposes. There's an array of things you can do with it. You know, but on the flip coin of that, there are some restrictions on that funding, and there are some obligations we have in terms of making sure we use it appropriately. So half of that funding will come in June next month, and then the other half of that will come a year from June, so in June of 2022. And I think we have until 2024 to spend the cash. So that's that direct assistance pot of money, if you will. Then there's another, I guess, another pot of money under House Bill 632 that the legislature developed. That is a chunk of money from the state's allocation of the American Rescue Plan Act. That funding is being distributed to cities, towns, and counties based on the gas tax formula. So they used that formula to determine how much cities and towns would get across the state. That funding is not competitive in terms of the grant funding. It is something we have to apply for, but again, it's not competitive. It's allocated for our community. That's $327,000. And that's specifically earmarked for water and sewer infrastructure projects. It does require a match, and that match can be either a 1-to-1 match or 25% of the funding you received through the direct assistance. So in our case, rather than matching it with $327,000, we only have to match it with $125,000. That's the second pot of money. Then there's a third pot of money, and that's a competitive grant process from the state of Montana. I want to say that that's like $250 million available. Don't quote me on that, but it's a large chunk of change. Again, from the American Rescue Plan. That is a competitive grant process. The applications for that will be due July 15th, although the forms aren't yet available. They know when they're due. It's supposed to be a relatively simple process to acquire that funding. There is a match requirement. The better you do in a match, the better you rank, I think. And that's our understanding preliminarily, is then the better you rank in receiving funding. With all of that taken into account, Stevensville stands to break some pretty serious ground on some needed projects in our community. Because we've been diligent in putting cash away in our water fund for future projects, we have a sizable match. Altogether, all funds combined, I think our water fund sits around $1.6 million. Of course, a lot of that is tied up in bond obligations for future payments and that sort of thing, short-lived assets. But there is a sizable amount of money available in that fund to put towards a project that we could leverage the rest of this funding with. So what you'll see on your June 10th agenda is a preliminary engineering report from HDR Engineering. That project is coming to a close. So you'll see that report, and then you will hear guidance from the administration and HDR into how we think the council should proceed with these funding opportunities. We've preliminarily prioritized leakage in that we would like to see us replace a number of mains that we know are leaking. It ties into a health and safety piece where we know we would rank a little higher if we could leverage the idea that if we replace these leaking mains, that would obviously help with some climate response, which is a requirement of the funding, one of the requirements of the funding. The other health and safety piece is that we could increase some fire flows in the community by replacing some mains. So that's one priority we have identified. The other would be water storage, obviously. And so, the PER that you see that evening will address water storage and the options you have available to it for storage. So without belaboring that any further, you're going to expect that conversation on June 10th. it's pretty exciting. I think, we've done a good job in getting ready to have these projects shovel ready, so to speak, so that when funding was available, we'd be able to put them to work. And we're finding ourselves in that position now. So that's good news. The last piece I'll mention on the executive report then is that I appreciate all of you taking the time to fill out the doodle poll for your budget workshops. I reached a really close consensus on a couple of dates. So we'll continue to massage that and try to get something in stone by the time I return, so we can get some things on your calendars. So again, thank you for doing that so quickly. I appreciate it. And barring any questions, I'll let you move on.
I do have I guess this has been like my council comment thing. I start off with a cough. It's been going like that for months now. But anyway, first off, I want to wish you, Mayor, a safe trip and whatnot as you're taking off this week. I want to congratulate Miss Devlin on getting the award from the Bitterroot Valley Chamber of Commerce. And I want to wish Miss Renee Christensen, who has been the office manager for many years from Active Care Family Chiropractic, well wishes as she's moving to South Carolina. She's done a lot for this community and didn't even live here in Stevensville. Actually lived in Hamilton. Wish her the best in her future endeavors. And the biggest thing that I really kind of want to talk about is I really think that we should be putting a bigger focus on public participation with some of these things. I do know that Mr. Michelson and Mr. Orteball 2 weeks ago wanted to make a comment on I believe it was the pool agenda item. I personally feel, and I hope that we should come down to talk about this when it comes to our rules, when it comes to meetings and whatnot, is that if something's on the agenda, we should allow the public to at least have some sort of comment period about it, because the public comment period is for stuff that's not on the agenda. So if there's something listed on the agenda, whether or not we're coming to a decision on it, the public should be able to have some sort of input on it other than Facebook, letters, carrier pigeon and all that. Other than that, that's my piece.
Okay, any other council comments?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to say thanks to Bobby. This is in no way a lack of support for your position. I know you work very hard, and I know this is something that's necessary for the community, but these are tough. So, know that we do support you in your position and what you're trying to do for the town. I think it's very important. It's just, we'll continue to work on it.
Thank you.
Any other town council comments? Board reports?
Yes, I have a board report. Planning and Zoning Committee met last night. That last town council meeting, you saw the work plan that we put together, which is pretty ambitious. So last night we talked about a couple of things, and one of the first things on this work plan is defining expectations of a subcommittee to review a draft subdivision regulation procedure or draft subdivision regulation document that's produced by the Department of Commerce. I would like to, on behalf of the committee, ask for a consensus from the town council to allow the town administration to begin looking for members of the community who would want to be on this subcommittee, to volunteer to look at this rather onerous document so that the limited members of the Planning and Zoning Committee don't have to do all that work on their own. These would be members, people that live in town. I especially came up with this idea after the issues that we had with Bergdorf Estates and not really being able to understand subdivision regulation, which is, on one hand, it's pretty simple, but on the other hand, it's been made very complicated by state law. So there are some specific areas that I think that the public could have some input and being able to massage this document to customize it to what the town is looking for and looking at. So that being said, I think that the mayor and town administration is ready to look for and try to put forth or put out through various methods on the town website and social media to ask for volunteers who are willing to put in between 15 and 20 hours between now and September to be able to get together and look at some specific chapters in this draft document that has been put together by the Department of Commerce, which is 128 pages long. We would only be looking at probably 30 or 40 of those pages because a lot of it is bound by state law. This is what you have to do, blah, 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 blah. But there are some areas in there in the procedures for review, some of the design criterias that we can try to put our own stamp on it and give people who, in my opinion, obviously had some interest in what was going on in the community, a chance to sit down together and sit down with town government and the planning and zoning board and try to understand each other better so that we can try to make something better for the town when we're in the midst of expansion.
Okay, any other board reports from folks?
Climate Change Advisory Board. We had a great meeting by myself. Haven't come to any consensus on anything, but I will say this, I'm gonna throw this out as a reach to the community. If anyone is interested, you may send me an email or you can contact anyone in town offices and they can tell you how to get up with me. Thank you.
All right, with that, if there's nothing else for the good of the order, we'll go ahead and adjourn, everybody. Thanks for your time and have a good rest of your week.